Gaza is reeling after Tuesday night's strike on a hospital. Hundreds are dead. Protests have since erupted across the region condemning the attack.
Families of hostages taken by Hamas urged German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Israel to, quote, bring their babies back home.
EU leaders finished their virtual summit with a clear message of support for Israel after a week of mixed messages. France and Germany reach an agreement on reform of the electricity market after months of deadlock.
Shock and outrage has spread across the Middle East and beyond following Tuesday night's blast at a hospital in Gaza City. Palestinian officials say at least 500 people are dead. Scores more are feared to be trapped under the rubble. This as Israel issued fresh evacuation orders Wednesday morning for the besieged enclave. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has condemned the hospital attack as horrific and has called for an immediate ceasefire. The Hamas militant groups say Israel is to blame for the strike, but Israel says the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group is responsible. Jordan has since cancelled a four-way summit with US President Joe Biden, Egypt's leader and the president of the Palestinian territories. The European Council President Charles Michel was also quick to condemn the strike on the hospital.
We got this information when we were together during this virtual meeting with the leaders. It seems to be confirmed, and an attack against a civilian infrastructure is not in line with international law.
Meanwhile, protests have erupted across the region, in particular in the occupied West Bank and southern Lebanon, which is controlled by the Hezbollah militant group. The faction has called for a, quote, day of unprecedented anger to be held on Wednesday. The US has issued a do not travel warning for Lebanon and has authorised all non-emergency personnel to leave.
Around 20 relatives of Germans being held hostage in Gaza gathered outside the German embassy in Tel Aviv when Chancellor Olaf Scholz arrived in Israel. Together with numerous other leaders, Scholz is being urged to put all his might into securing their release. Ricardo Luke recognized her daughter in a video circulating online. She says the last information she received of her was that she had suffered a head wound and was in a hospital in Gaza.
Meiner Tochter, dass sie stark sein wird, dass sie durchhalten wird und wir kommen und wir hoffen, dass sie so gut wird und wir sie befreien können.
Meanwhile, Karen Shem has reacted to the video Hamas militants released of her daughter Maya.
I didn't know if she's dead or alive until yesterday. All I knew is that she's might be kidnapped. I'm begging the world to bring my baby back home. She only went to a party, to a festival party, to have some fun. And now she's in Gaza.
The video is the first the militant group has released of the people they are holding. The Israeli military said on Monday at least 199 hostages were taken into Gaza, more than previously estimated. Hamas says it's holding up to 250.
1 minute of silence for the victims in Israel, in Palestine, and also in Belgium and France following terror attacks in both. That's how this virtual extraordinary summit of EU leaders began on Tuesday, as they aim to fix a common position on the Israeli-Hamas war after a week of contradictory messages. And it's now clear that even if the 27 member states support Israel, there's still room for criticism.
When you cut the basic infrastructure, when you cut access to water, when you cut electricity, if you don't allow food to be delivered, this is not in line with the international law.
A common statement issued on Sunday came after European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen went to Israel last week, where she was accused of failing to urge Israel to act with constraint. Humanitarian aid for Palestine was also at the centre of controversy when a single commissioner announced its suspension alone. It's now clear, though, that Europe will continue sending humanitarian aid to Palestinians, even more so by tripling it.
It is Hamas who are the terrorists, not the Palestinian people, so we have to care for the Palestinian people and their humanitarian needs. There is no contradiction in standing with Israel in solidarity and acting for the humanitarian needs for the Palestinians.
The 27 heads of state and government also discussed future challenges, among them avoiding a regional escalation of the conflict and preventing a rise in extremism in Europe. They're also calling on Hamas to immediately and unconditionally release all hostages.
In the north of Israel, residents of the villages that are closest to the border with Lebanon are bracing for the worst. This is why many evacuees say that they are leaving for Jerusalem. Israel's defense ministry has ordered 28 communities within 2 kilometers of the dividing lines with Lebanon to evacuate. More than 60% of the area's population has already left. This man is sending his family to safety, but he's among the few who are determined to stay behind. Since the start of the war, tension in the area has grown. Military bases are off limits for cameras, but the mobilization of Israeli troops is massive. There's now daily fire from the Lebanese Hezbollah militant division, serving as a warning against a full Israeli land invasion of the Gaza Strip. A reservist at a gas station is one of the few soldiers willing to talk. In the nearby town of Shilomi, anxious residents are still waiting to be evacuated. This couple say they are not sleeping. Every noise makes them jump. They are scared for their children. Since the war erupted 10 days ago, they've had lots of what they say are, quote, terrorists crossing the border.
We're less than 1 kilometer away from Lebanon. The wall is right behind me. And people in the area do have mixed feelings. Some are determined to stay, others to leave. But one thing everybody agrees on is that this war will spill into northern Israel. I'm Valerie Goria in northern Israel for Euronews.
Ukraine's military says it's carried out one of its most destructive attacks on Russian air assets since the start of the war. It says it used longer-range ballistic missiles donated by the US.
І сьогодні особлива вдячність Сполученим Штатам. Наші домовленості з президентом Байденом виконуються. Виконуються дуже влучно. Атакамси себе показали.
Avdiivka in the eastern Donetsk region remains a frontline hotspot. Russian forces have launched a series of attacks against Ukrainian positions. Police in Donetsk say they've evacuated children from a dozen frontline settlements. As another winter in war-torn Ukraine sets in, the UN has delivered high-power energy transformers to help keep power on in homes, schools, hospitals and businesses.
The Chinese president called on his Russian counterpart to make joint efforts to safeguard international justice. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin met on the first day of the Belt and Road Infrastructure Initiative in Beijing. Putin stressed the need for cooperation to face global challenges.
В нынешних непростых условиях особенно востребована тесная внешнеполитическая координация, что мы и делаем. И сегодня мы это все тоже обсудим. Все, в том числе двусторонние наши отношения, ну прежде всего это.
中方愿同俄方一道，准确把握历史大势，顺应世界发展潮流，始终立足两国人民根本利益，不断充实双方合作的时代内涵，体现大国担当，为助力两国发展振兴，维护国际公平正义，促进世界和共同发展，贡献力量。
At the start of the new Silk Road Forum, Xi Jinping pledged improved access to China's market for foreign companies and more than 94 billion euros in new financing for developing countries.
France and Germany have reached an agreement on reform of the electricity market after months of deadlock. With the deal decided on Tuesday by EU energy ministers, it's hoped that it will help reduce sharp increases in electricity prices like those experienced last year. To this end, the intensive deployment of renewable energy sources, among others, will be promoted.
La reforma protege a los consumidores ante futuras situaciones de emergencia, incluyendo instrumentos que permiten mitigar el impacto en los consumidores derivados de futuras crisis de precios.
One of the thorniest issues in negotiations between ministers was the so-called contracts for difference, a type of public subsidy financed by the extra profits of electricity companies. France has managed to ensure that the money can be used to finance both new and existing nuclear plants, but only to increase capacity or repower them. Germany feared it could create distortions in the single market, so it's obtained assurances that the European Commission will set up control mechanisms. Although this is an important step, the deal still needs to be negotiated with the European Parliament before it can become a reality.
Republican Jim Jordan has lost the first vote in his bid to become US House of Representatives Speaker. Despite intense lobbying, 20 Republicans refused to back the right-wing Ohio congressman. More voting was shelved on Tuesday as the close ally of Donald Trump tries to rally more support. A second vote is due on Wednesday. Congress's lower chamber has had no speaker since Kevin McCarthy was ousted 2 weeks ago in a right-wing revolt.